Chapter 60, Reinforcements. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Chapter 60. Reinforcements. All of our adult warriors were transferred away by the Gold Black Mountain, growled the Fire Leopard clan warrior hoarsely. The man had tens of serious injuries on his body, and even a few bones were chopped broken. He had struggled to the Cold Stream Valley with only a sliver of hope in his heart. Only 300 weak warriors were left in the clan. The enemies from the Blood Crocodile clan and Ghost Frog clan are many. Many, the man shouted. He grabbed Ji Xia's arms with a pair of bleeding hands, gnashed his teeth and cried, "Ji Xia, the great leader. Help my clan. Save my clansmen. We are the largest branch of the Fire Leopard clan, half of all the old ones, children, and women of the entire Fire Leopard clan are within our branch." Ji Xia frowned and said resolutely and decisively, "The Fire Leopard clansmen are our brothers and sisters. If there's anything happening to them, we have to help. The Blood Crocodile clan and Ghost Frog clan are just a bunch of dogs of the Black Water Serpent clan. We can easily crush their heads. Abba, the mine of the Cold Stream Valley is highly important. You have been ordered to guard this place, you can't just leave the valley and lead the troop to fight." "Abba, I've already grown up, I can fight for our Fire Crow clan as well." "Abba, this time, let me go." Ji Xia gaped stunned, while looking at Ji Hao from head to toe. Ji Hao held his head high, puffed his chest out, looked Ji Xia in the eyes, and said, "Abba, though I'm young, I'm much smarter than lots of the uncles in the clan. Besides, I'm a junior Magus already. I'm even more powerful than many uncles in the clan." The nearby standing Fire Crow clan warriors looked at Ji Hao with complicated expressions in their eyes. It had been only half a month, but Ji Hao's power had been improving as fast as a fire arrow. While kids his age were still training at the most basic level of novice magi, Ji Hao had already become a junior magus, much more powerful than most of the ordinary clansmen. In the southern wasteland, becoming a 5th-level novice magus would make a man qualify to fight in battle as a magus. If one made it to the junior level, then he or she would become a core warrior that the clan could rely on. "My boy, how old you think you are? But that you wouldn't get yourself hurt, Abba trusts you in that." Ji Xia slapped his own head and laughed out aloud, "How, my good boy, though you're still a kid, you act like a grown man. Ji Ying, Ji Lang, Qing Ying. The three of you are to take 2,000 Fire Crow clan warriors and 1,100 Qing Yi clan warriors and go help our brothers of the Fire Leopard clan. Blood Crocodile clan and Ghost Frog clan. How dare these trash touch our territory? The Cold Stream Valley could use more mining slaves. Go capture some strong men alive," shouted Ji Xia out, with a deep breath. In the southern wasteland, once the leader gave the command, all the warriors could get ready to fight as fast as possible, without any hesitation or delay. Only after a quarter of an hour, 2,000 elite warriors rode on their contracted beasts, directed by the wounded Fire Leopard clan warrior, and rushed into the jungle along with sharp whistling noises. The situation was urgent. Under Ji Hao's arrangement, 3-4 Tusk's mammoths were running in front of the troops as vanguards, crushing all those towering trees in their way, opening a broad and flat path for the troops. 2 hours, uncle. We only need 2 hours to get to your clan. Ji Hao sat on the fat bear's back, and talked to the Fire Leopard clan warrior sitting behind him. "Do you have any idea about why the Gold Black Mountain transferred your warriors away?" The Fire Leopard clan warrior shook his head without any clue. Such things had never happened before. The southern wasteland jungle was highly dangerous. All the clans had to keep their vigilance towards not only sneak attacks from their enemies but also to the threats from all kinds of wild beasts living in the jungle. Usually, when the Gold Black Mountain transferred warriors from other clans, they would always leave enough warriors to make sure that the clan could protect itself. But this time, nearly all of the thousands of the elite Fire Leopard clan's warriors were transferred away by the Gold Black Mountain, leaving only 300 of the weakest warriors to guard the clan. This was equal to murder in the southern wasteland. However, the Fire Leopard clan, as a loyal ally of the Fire Crow clan for thousands of years, had still sent all their warriors out without any hesitation. "Hung Luo, can you bring us more companions?" While Ji Hao tightly grabbed the hair of the fat bear and leaned his body, he shouted at Hung Luo, who was riding a red leopard and running side by side him, "Powerful companions. Those weak and small ones will be useless." Hung Luo raised her longbow high, dark green hair fluttering behind her. She opened her mouth, and uttered a silent call towards the sky. Circles of air ripples could be seen in the sky, spreading towards the surrounding. Soon, long and reverberant roars came from the surrounding jungle as one fell, another rose. The branches and leaves ruffled because of gusts of strange winds, which blew out of the jungle. A short while later, some strange and mysterious silhouettes appeared on both sides of the troops, and forwarded with the troops at the same speed. These silhouettes had shapes similar to beasts, however, their bodies were all wrapped in a weird, dense fog, and couldn't be seen clearly. They were not ordinary living creatures, neither ghosts, they were some mysterious and powerful beings, produced by the natural magical power, and nourished by the life force energy of the jungle. Only Hung Luo, the guard and soul of the jungle, was capable of calling these mysterious and magical creatures out. In fact, many of the gods, worshipped by small southern wasteland clans, were these kind of beings. Stone was sitting on a four-tusked mammoth's back, raised its gigantic fist, while slowly punching his own chest in a strange rhythm. The loud and clear punching sound resounded through the jungle within hundreds of miles radius. Soon, the same impassioned, loud punching sounds came from the mountain, tens of miles away. "Brothers, that I heard my brothers," murmured Stone. "How, I found .3 of my brothers, more powerful than me. They asked me about what booze is, and how does the grilled meat taste like. Ha ha ha. Tell them. Tell them that they'll have as much as booze and grilled meat as they want. Tell them the meat is really delicious. They can even come and live with us, the Fire Crow clan. My Abba and Amma are the most hospitable people in the world." Ji Hao grinned from ear to ear. Magical creatures like Stone were extremely rare amongst the entities in this jungle, but Stone called 3 of them out in one go. What a surprise. Stoneman's thoughts were as simple as a piece of paper: if you only have enough booze and delicious meat, seducing them becomes the easiest thing. Years ago, after having a bowl of wine and a piece of honeycomb of Ji Hao, Stone became Ji Hao's best mate and shielded him hundreds of times when Ji Hao hung around in the jungle. Treeman was also sitting on a four-tusked mammoth's back. If he would move by itself, it would very slow. He glanced at Stone, who was very proud at the moment. Not to be outdone, Treeman also raised his branch-like arm, and released countless green light spots from his arm. Those light spots were drifting profusely and disorderly, towards the surrounding forest like a group of butterflies. The four-tusked mammoths didn't slow down. They were running forward like hurricanes. About half an hour later, the forest in front of them suddenly shook, the earth trembled and the mountains swayed. 2 gigantic, ancient trees, which didn't look different from the other nearby trees, suddenly opened their green flame-like eyes, and slowly pulled their roots out of the ground. Their long roots quickly coiled together into 4 legs. Ji Hao was totally stunned. Is the old tree planning to slaughter the entire jungle? Thought Ji Hao. He remembered that the body of Treeman himself was no more than 1,000 feet, but these 2 ancient, giant trees were nearly double the size of Treeman, which implied that their power must also be double than that of Treeman. "Whoa, let's go get them all." Ji Hao let out a long roar, and waved his fist excitedly in the air. The black, huge ape, who was following the troops and leaped through the branches all the time, sniffed scornfully, stood down on a huge tree, and uttered a great and sonorous howl. Less than a minute later, the same sharp howls came from the distant forest. Chapter 61, Wildfire. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 61. Wildfire. From a long distance away a great fire could be seen and the scent of blood hung oppressively in the air. Ji Hao was standing on a large tree, hiding behind branches and leaves while looking at the valley miles away. This valley was the resident place of the Fire Leopard clan, and it had an ideal location to live in. In front of the village a winding river was passing by, supplying plenty of water to the village. Behind the village was a steep cliff, which was thickly strewn with thorns and surrounded the valley from 3 directions. At the moment, the village of the Fire Leopard clan had already been breached. The cabins and cottages that were distributed randomly in the valley had all been set ablaze. Black smoke rose high and reached to the sky. Inside the valley over 10,000s of dead bodies were scattered in a state of disarray, and judging from appearances, they were all clansmen of the Fire Leopard clan. Hundreds of crimson blood crocodiles, each being tens of feet long, were lying on the ground and were feasting on those bloody bodies. At the back of the valley there was an area that was abundant with thick thorns, creating a natural barrier that upon first glance was impassable. A winding trail was hiding amongst those dense thorns, secretly leading to the top of the cliff behind the village. At the top of the cliff, there were numerous Fire Leopard clan's people huddled up on the ground. Some kids were crying and wailing. A tall flagpole, made of beast bones, was standing erect at the end of the trail. Tens of red leopard tails could be seen tied to it, fluttering along with the wind. Sharp howling came from those tails, and tens of faint red phantoms of leopards, each being nearly 100 feet long, were darting around through those highly poisonous thorns, each spewing large flaming sparks and black smoke from time to time. "The banner that carried the ancestors' souls of the Fire Leopard clan," murmured Qinying, who stood beside Ji Hao looking at the tens of feet high flagpole. "It seems that the Fire Leopard clan's Magus priests became desperate. Unless facing a deadly danger, no one would dare to disturb the peaceful rest of their ancestors and call them out to fight." Hoo-hoo, an odd reedy shouting sound could be heard. Hundreds of muscular blood crocodile clan's warriors were trying their best to throw the torches in their hands into the clump of thorns, attempting to burn those annoying thorns out and open up a broad road, leading to the top of the cliff. However, to deter their actions, tens of phantoms of fire leopards were flashing around inside the clump of thorns. Whenever branches were emblazed, these fire leopards could be seen darting over instantly, opening their mouths and inhaling every single fiery spark into their open maws. Those blood crocodile clan's warriors had thrown thousands of torches made with beasts' fat towards the clump of thorns, but failed to burn clear even a little bit of it. Large groups of short, green-skinned, bulging-eyed and frog-like men were waving their exquisite blowguns, loudly cursing towards the Fire Leopard clan's people on the cliff top. These were the Ghost Frog clan's people. Nearly 100 captured Fire Leopard clan's women were pressed down on the ground by these Ghost Frog clan's warriors. Besides each of these women were a group of Ghost Frog clan men waiting impatiently. These women were struggling and crying desperately on the ground. Their voices caused all of the Fire Leopard clan's children on the cliff top to start wailing and screaming. "Cowards of the Fire Leopard clan! We've slaughtered your clansmen, we've burned your village, and we're playing with your women," shouted a Ghost Frog clan's warrior, whose skin was thickly dotted with fist-sized pustules and was riding on a poisonous ghost frog tens of feet long. "Look. The skins of your women are so white and tender, a lot whiter than our Ghost Frog clan women. Are you gonna watch them tortured to death by us?" No. Following the raging growl, a sturdy man whose body was covered in the blood of his missing left arm and presumably some enemies, jumped up from among the few hundred Fire Leopard clan's warriors remaining by their ancestors' tailed flagpole. He rushed fiercely down along the trail filled with anger and hatred. The Fire Leopard clan warrior who had ran down the nearly 7 miles long trail was gasping heavily, and waving his iron axe, hacking towards the nearest enemy. Tens of Ghost Frog clan's warriors raised their blowguns together. Along with the swishing sounds, tens of black poisonous thorns were blown out and proceeded to deeply embed themselves in the Fire Leopard clan warrior's body. The venom on the black thorns quickly spread. The body of the Fire Leopard clan warrior immediately began to swell, and countless pustules were emerging from his skin within the span of few breaths. The Fire Leopard clan's warrior could only stagger less than 10 steps forward before collapsing, his sturdy body hitting the ground heavily. In the blink of an eye, the once hard and sturdy body of the Fire Leopard clan's warrior became a mere puddle of black pus. Like blood, slowly flowing everywhere. You stinky frogs! Save the body! My babies haven't eaten enough yet. Such a nice piece of meat and you wasted it, shouted a Blood Crocodile clan's warrior angrily, who was wearing blood-red leather armor and holding a pair of heavy swords. In the valley, large groups of Blood Crocodile clan and Ghost Frog clan's warriors raised their heads, while laughing to the sky madly and rampantly. Ji Hao narrowed his eyes, and easily enveloped the entire valley, which was about tens of miles in radius, with his spiritual power. He perceived that there were around 1,000 Blood Crocodile clan's warriors in the valley, while the number of the Ghost Frog clan's warriors was twice that, with about 2,000. None of these warriors were at the same level as senior magi or magus priests. The most powerful warriors were the tens of junior magi of the Blood Crocodile clan, whereas the Ghost Frog clan had only around 10 junior magi in their ranks. For either the Blood Crocodile clan or the Ghost Frog clan, the ancient creatures they worshipped, the Blood Crocodile and Ghost Frog, were far less powerful than the three-legged gold fire crow. Therefore, the bloodline power they gained from these ancient creatures was a lot weaker than that of the Fire Crow clan's people. The percentages of senior magi and junior magi of their warriors were also much lower. Just this amount of people. When did those trash of the Blood Crocodile clan and Ghost Frog clan become so fearless? Ji Hao sneered. He quickly connected this event with that of couple of days ago where Di Luo and his underlings tried to trap him. These incidents had the strong feeling of being a scheme. Uncle, tell our people to prepare. Ji Hao raised his right arm, waved forward and shouted out, let's kill all of these damn dogs. Treeman stepped out of the jungle and stood beside the river. He stamped his feet hard on the ground and deeply rooted himself into the ground with these two thick roots of his body expanded quickly and soon swelled to his original size. A nearly 2,000 feet high, gigantic tree stood beside the river, drawing the rich nutrients from the river water. Meanwhile, his roots were quickly stretching underground. Within the span of only a few breaths, his roots went across the river, that was hundreds of feet wide, quickly approaching underneath the Fire Leopard clan village. Kill, growled Ji Hao in a low voice. Kill, agreed Treeman, letting out a roar along with Ji Hao. The dark, colossal treehole-like mouth of his opened, spewing enormous amounts of cold air. Thousands of armed thick black roots darted out from the ground, piercing towards those Blood Crocodile clan and Ghost Frog clan warriors like poisonous snakes. There were so many of roots thrust out from the ground that they covered nearly the entire valley. The Blood Crocodile clan and Ghost Frog clan's warriors all felt like even the sky was darkening. Enemies, shouted the Blood Crocodile clan's warrior holding two swords. The sound made by roots piercing through human bodies could be heard. The bodies of hundreds of the weakest Blood Crocodile clan and Ghost Frog clan's men were punctured by the roots of Treeman. Those long roots carried their bodies and rose high into the air. Large amounts of blood splashed down, and to the warriors fighting it was as if the sky was raining blood. Hoo-hoo, reverberant roars came from the jungle. 2,000 Fire Crow clan's warriors, riding on their contracted beasts, rushed out of the jungle, approaching the river. All of their beasts roared loudly and mightily leapt across the river, proceeding with great momentum to rush into the burning Fire Leopard clan village. The Blood Crocodile clan and Ghost Frog clan's warriors shook their weapons fiercely, chopping through the tree roots, piercing towards them one after another. They were shouting and screaming in panic and horror, looking aghast at those Fire Crow clan warriors who flew across the river and were rushing towards them. In the next moment, hundreds of arrows swooshed through the air, piercing their throats and sending them flying backwards. Blood gushed out of their mouths in a crimson torrent. The Fire Crow warriors rushed into the crowd of the Blood Crocodile clan and Ghost Frog clan's warriors while they were all flurried, and raised their weapons high, and knocked groups of enemies down. Those Blood Crocodile clan and Ghost Frog clan's warriors were killed as same as grass before a wildfire. It was as if they had even forgotten to resist. Oh God! Why are they here? The Blood Crocodile Clan warrior holding the pair of swords screamed out. Chapter 62, Besieged. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 62. Besieged. Call. Ji Hao cawed towards the sky. A sphere of fiery light darted out from his back, and quickly condensed into a pair of fiery wings, flapping behind his body. With his body wrapped in a faint light, Ji Hao transformed into a beam of flame, darted out of the jungle, flew across the river and the nearly a mile-wide flat area in front of the village, and directly rushed into the village, leaving after images and waves of hot air behind. The Blood Crocodile Clan's warrior with a pair of swords was a peak-level junior Magus. While he was waving his swords and roaring to the sky, a cloud of blood mist appeared behind his body, within which, an over 100 feet long blood crocodile was rolling. Every time when the blood crocodile rolled over in that blood mist cloud, the skin of this warrior would become translucent. With the help of Gold Crow magical pupils, Ji Hao clearly saw the 8 meridians inside his body, which were shining with a blood-red light. On those meridians, a few thumb-sized Magus acupoints were shining brightly. This guy is so close to the awakening his Magus acupoints, thought Ji Hao. But you won't get there in this life, laughed Ji Hao loud out. He flew crossing miles, appeared in front of the warrior, throwing a punch towards the face of that Blood Crocodile Clan's warrior. The thing that the fiery wings brought Ji Hao was amazing speed, which was so fast that ordinary people couldn't even catch Ji Hao with their eyes. The ancient gold fire crows were able to travel from up the heaven to down in the underworld. The most powerful gold fire crow could fly across 100,000 miles within a single moment. Though Ji Hao couldn't be mentioned in the same breath as the legendary creatures such as the ancient gold fire crows, amongst ordinary junior magi, he was fast enough to make his enemies helpless. For example, the Blood Crocodile Clan's warrior in front of him, who was staring at the air blankly, didn't even saw Ji Hao's shadow. He waved his heavy swords madly and moved forward, purely relying on his good fighting instinct. Break! Shouted Ji Hao. He locked his fingers together, triggering Lin, Bing, Do, Zhe. 4 of the 9 secret words, simultaneously. All of his internal power gathered together. Like a powerful golden bead, he brought along the surrounding natural power, hitting forward dauntlessly. All of Ji Hao's muscles were tightened and all of his bones were creaking, making sounds like a heavy, metal bell. A dragon roar came from Ji Hao's body. Upon the multicolored flame in his lower abdomen, the last bit of Ji Hao's senior Magus blood was quickly consumed. The Blood Crocodile Clan's warrior with a pair of swords screamed out hopelessly. He still couldn't see Ji Hao's figure, however, weirdly, he saw a fist. That was a gigantic fist, which seemed to block the entire sight of the sky, and gathered the magnificent power of the heaven and the earth, emitting inexhaustible light and heat, pushing towards him like a shooting star. There was not enough time for him to raise his swords and hack the fist. He could only hold them high horizontally, attempting to hold the punch off. The pair of heavy swords were 8-foot long and 1-foot wide, forged by refined iron. 3 spell symbols were flashing on their surfaces. They were a pair of Magus tools. In the southern wasteland, every single Magus tool would be incomparably precious. Only the most talented warriors of a clan were qualified to have their own Magus tools. Once those spell symbols were engraved on the surface of the Magus tools, they would become tens or even hundreds of times harder and more powerful than they originally were. Ji Hao stared at this warrior, and fixed his eyes in his heart. Ji Hao didn't take the pair of swords seriously at all. His right fist directly hit on the crossing point of 2 swords, along with a slight hint of spirit power which tightly connected with nature. The Blood Crocodile Clan's warrior let out a howl. He finally saw Ji Hao's face, and he couldn't believe it. Even my boy is a bit bigger than you, shouted the Blood Crocodile Clan's warrior a moment before Ji Hao's fist landed on his swords. The pair of heavy swords shook intensely. Ji Hao's fist was as heavy as a mountain, crashing down on the Blood Crocodile Clan's warrior. The arms of the warrior couldn't bear the horrible power of that punch. The bones of his arm broke inch by inch, while his muscles were shocked and tore apart from his arms by the great power, and were sent flying far away along with a swishing sound. The fist of Ji Hao held against the sword, pressed hard on the Blood Crocodile clan warrior's chest. The pair of heavy sword were bended by Ji Hao's power, the spell symbols on their surfaces flashed brightly for one last time, then dimmed down and disappeared. Followed by a cracking sound, countless cracks appeared on the swords, and metal fragments started jangling down. The chest of the Blood Crocodile clan's warrior was hollowed, blood continuously gushing out of his mouth along with pieces of his internal organs. On his back, a fist-shaped hole appeared on the leather armor. Ji Hao's punch punctured his body and even opened up a tens of miles long ditch behind him. 7 to 8 Blood Crocodile clan's warriors were standing near the ditch, all of them seemed frozen, and stared at Ji Hao with a strange look on their faces. These were the Blood Crocodile clan's junior magi, they all had been shocked dead by the power of Ji Hao's punch, none of them survived. Bang! The body of the Blood Crocodile clan's warrior with a pair of swords suddenly exploded into pieces, along with the crocodile-skin armor worn by him. The 7 to 8 warriors standing behind him also exploded one after another, blood splashed everywhere within the circumference of tens of miles. Ji Hao did all these with only a single punch. The Fire Crow clan's warriors, who were fighting around, were all stunned. After the span of a few breaths, they suddenly raised their weapons and started shouting madly. How? 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 The shouting sound even shook the earth. Ji Hao's extraordinary performance highly encouraged these warriors. On the contrary, all of Blood Crocodile clan and Ghost Frog clan's warriors were screaming and fleeing, as if they were facing a god or devil. Ji Hao's face was strangely young and tender, he was even a lot shorter than other Fire Crow clan's warriors, judging from appearance, he should be a kid. However, this young warrior killed the leader of the Blood Crocodile clan's warriors with a single punch, and the same punch also killed 7 to 8 elite warriors of the Blood Crocodile clan. This punch of Ji Hao completely shattered the last bit of courage to fight, which had remained in the enemy's hearts. All of them dropped their weapons, fleeing madly backwards. The Fire Leopard clan village was in the perfect location. In front of the village, there was the river that Ji Hao and his troop had came across. On the left side, right side and behind the village was a cliff covered with thorns, which meant that there was no way out. Those remaining Blood Crocodile clan and Ghost Frog clan's warriors were fleeing in all directions like headless chickens for a while, then kneeled on the ground, and surrendered to the Fire Crow clan's warriors. Treeman walked over from the other side of the river with heavy steps, dropped some thick and strong vines. The Fire Crow warriors then tied those surrendered enemies up. All of them are qualified to be mining slaves. Haha, laughed Ji Hao. He was standing on the back of the fat bear and was looking at the captured ones, then shook his head and said, "This time, the Fire Leopard clan lost quite a few clansmen, we have to share a part of these slaves with them." The ancestors' banner on top of the cliff behind the village suddenly shook, tens of phantoms of fire leopards flashed into the banner one after another. Tens of elder magi and magus priests of the Fire Leopard clan walked down from the trail with sadness-filled faces, towards Ji Hao. Ji Hao's face became serious, he jumped down from the back of the fat bear, and walked towards those elders. They saluted to each other. Before they spoke a word, loud and sonorous sounds of horns came from the jungle far away with a loud shouting sound. About a quarter of an hour later, large groups of warriors gushed out of the jungle on the other side of the river. Hundreds of gigantic riding birds rose into the air from the jungle. There were sturdy and muscular warriors on their backs who raised their banners that symbolized their own clans. Tens of different-sized banners were fluttering in the wind. Warriors across the river burst a proud and mad laughter altogether. The appearance of these banners meant that there were at least tens of clans with all of their forces gathered. At least 100,000 warriors were gathered inside the jungle across the river. Ji Hao remained silent for a while, turned around with an extremely embarrassed face, and let out a bitter smile to those Fire Leopard's clan elders and said, "I think we're besieged here." Chapter 63, Allied Forces. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 63. Allied forces. The continuous sounds of drums, horns and shouts were so loud that even the sky was shaking. The roars of the battle beasts and birds started a fierce gust of wind, violently swaying the jungle in the vicinity of hundreds of miles. The Fire Crow clan and Fire Leopard's clan's warriors quickly drew back to the top of the cliff through the winding trail hidden in the wood of thorns, guarding the only trail that led to the top of the cliff. Magus priests of the Fire Leopard's clan ruthlessly beheaded those captured from the Blood Crocodile clan and Ghost Frog clan one after another, with bitter and sad expressions on their faces. Daggers, made from obsidian, tore those captives their necks apart. Once the fresh blood had spurted out of their wounds, a hot gust of wind would come roaring over, rolling all of the blood away. Every single drop of fresh blood was being absorbed by the ancestors' banner of the Fire Leopard's clan, which had been raised once again. Nourished by over 2,000 of captives' blood, 200 Fire Leopard's phantoms quietly darted out of the banner, crawled in those highly poisonous thorn bushes, without making any noticeable sound. Such a bunch of reckless people. Don't they fear the Fire Crow clan's revenge? Qi waved his long bow, standing on the edge of the cliff and shouted. Ji Hao crossed his arms around his chest, while looking at the groups of warriors who were rushing towards them in the jungle afar, without saying a word. In the southern wasteland, the cost to gather this many of elite forces from so many clans at the same time was very high. The paths in the southern wasteland jungle were dangerous and complicated. If someone tried to gather the warriors from tens of clans simultaneously, and arrange them in order to ambush a certain spot, the mobilization of the troops, the negotiations and time control would all be huge problems. Not to mention that almost every single southern wasteland warrior was a great eater. Even an ordinary novice Magus warrior needed at least 5 kilograms of meat, while the appetites of the senior and junior magi were similar to bottomless pits. Elite warriors from tens of clans summed up together could eat up 2 to 3 huge mountains piled up by beast meat within a short amount of time. No matter who planned all these, the money, the forces and the material resources they had to spend on all this were all astonishingly high. Fiery light flashed through Ji Hao's pupils. He was carefully identifying the totems painted on those banners. Cyan Cattle Clan, Buffalo Clan, Raging Bull Clan. The famous 3. Cattle clans, aren't they neutral clans, murmured Ji Hao. Tusk Tiger Clan, Raging Lion Clan, Wind Eagle Clan, these small clans have always been especially cautious and careful. What's wrong with them? Not afraid of death anymore. However, soon, Ji Hao found a few totems that made him feel stressed looking at those banners. Ghost Clan, Demon Clan, Goo Clan, 1, damn. These weird people had never any contact with the southern wasteland clans before. How did they get involved in this? Are they trying to challenge the Fire Crow clan? Or are they coveting this jungle of the southern wasteland? None of those mutual clans, such as the 3. Cattle clans, or the middle-scale clans like the Tusk Tiger Clan, Raging Lion Clan and Wind Eagle Clan, had ever challenged big clans like the Fire Crow Clan and Blackwater Serpent Clan, which were ruling their own pieces of land. All of these small to middle-scale clans had always been mutual and only minding their own businesses. They had never ganged up with either the Fire Crow or Blackwater Serpent Clan. These clans had never shown any sign of sudden rise, nor were they worried about complete collapsing. If someone had promised them enough profit, it would be reasonable for these small to middle-scale clans to gather together and try to tear off a fat piece of meat from the Fire Crow clan. However, clans like the Ghost Clan, Demon Clan, and Goo Clan never got along with other southern wasteland clans. Instead, they have formed their own systems. Even big clans like the Fire Crow clan wouldn't provoke them initiatively. Take the Ghost Clan as an example. They didn't have a bloodline power. What they had was a system of inheritance, called Ghost. Inheritance. From generation to generation, they were worshipping evil spirits and ghosts, existing in the jungle. Every newborn kid would merge with an evil ghost after he or she came to this world, becoming a half-human and half-ghost being. By merging their own body with those ghosts, they would be gifted all kinds of unimaginably strange power. There were only a few people in the Ghost Clan. However, the evil spirits they had inherited from their ancestors were very powerful. once their newborns merged with those evil spirits, they would become as powerful as ordinary junior magi. After the Ghost Clan warrior grew up and inherited all of the power from the evil spirit, their power would be great enough to compete with senior magi. Demon Clan, Goo Clan, and a few other small clans were all similar to the Ghost Clan, and had their own special systems. People from these clans were hardly human-like. From a certain degree, they had already become some other humanoid-like beings. Usually, these clans rarely connected with the outside world. None of the southern clan was willing to make contact with them. But today, Ji Hao had found 8 to 9 totems of these non-humankind clans. How generous you are! Whoever you are, why spent these much of efforts on this? For Abba, Amma, or me? Ji Hao gazed at those fluttering banners in the air, and gasped heavily. Uncle, release the wind. Sparrow. He turned around, looked at Qin Ying and said in a low voice. Qin Ying nodded with a twisted face, then carefully took a baby palm-sized, cyan, long-tail bird out of his cloth. This was a special kind of wind sparrow, only belonging to the Qin Yi clan. The size of this kind of sparrow was very minuscule, while the speed of it was extremely high. They knew how to hide themselves in the shadows of branches and leaves during flight. Even the snipe eagle, which had the best eyesight, could hardly find any trace of them. Go to the Cold Stream Valley. Good bird, tell brother Ji Xia what's happening here. Qin Ying fed the bird with a few round pills, that had a mix of his own blood and the essence of 5 kinds of cereals, and whispered a few words to the bird. The bird raised its head, repeated every single word said by Qin Ying with a silvery voice. The voice of the bird was clear and fluent, not even one word had been missed. Good, just like this, tell brother Ji Xia that this is a trap, that has been set by someone other people. Qin Ying narrowed his eyes and raised his hand. The bird let out a ringing call, and transformed into a faint piece of cyan shadow, rose high into the air and flew 7 to 8 miles away within the blink of an eye. A black gust of wind came from the sideway towards the bird. Within the black wind, tens of palm-sized iron-claw vultures, that had evil looks, gave a few high-pitched howls, then quickly encircled the flying cyan sparrow. The cyan wind sparrow lively moved and rotated within the circle of iron-claw vultures, dodged the attacks of tens of sharp claws within only a moment. The cyan sparrow was about to rush out of the circle with its tiny body and lightning-fast movements, when a sharp infant cry came from the air afar. On a tip of a branch miles away, under the banner of the Demon Clan, a deadly pale infant was leaning against a branch, who cried towards the bird with a very strange tone. The infant was giving a death and evil vibe, that was nothing like any human kid's. Before the cry faded, the cyan sparrow, which was flying in the air miles away, suddenly stopped, as if it was hit by a lightning bolt. Its body went slanted and fell down from the sky. A green serpent head quietly rose from the dense jungle below, opened its jaws and swallowed the falling cyan sparrow. Ji Hao's heart suddenly sank. Qin Ying's face darkened immediately. He almost cried out, "How? This sparrow that I raised it since I was a little kid. These bunch of bastards. I'll kill them all." On the other side of the river, 2 gigantic trees were pushed aside. A 3-meter tall, sturdy figure slowly walked out of the jungle, while carrying a wooden stake on his shoulder. The figure was half naked, his light green skin was covered in a twisted, ghost-face like totems. He looked up at Ji Hao and Qin Ying and said with a very muffled voice, "Walk out by yourselves, and beg for mercy, then we will kill only a half of you." The dense jungle started to shake, and waves of weird and creepy laughter continuously were coming from it. Dovico, 1, Gu, was a venom-based poison associated with cultures of South China, particularly Nanyue. The traditional preparation of gu poison involved sealing several venomous creatures, e.g., centipede, snake, scorpion, inside a closed container, where they devoured one another and allegedly concentrated their toxins into a single survivor. Goo was used in black magic practices such as manipulating sexual partners, creating malignant diseases and causing death. According to Chinese folklore, a goo spirit could transform into various animals, typically a worm, caterpillar, snake, frog, even dog or pig. Chapter 64, Soul Calling. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Note: Magus Treasure has been replaced by the Magic Treasure. Chapter 64. Soul Calling. My little bird, cried Qin Ying, whose body was slightly trembling. He sorrowfully looked at Ji Hao and said, "Now we can't inform your Abba. How, what should we do?" "Sit and wait," said Ji Hao in a relaxed tone. He grabbed a branch of thorns, and fiddled with it. "I'm the bait, and my Abba is the fish. Let's just take a seat and wait for a while. Let's see what these people got." "My poor little bird!" Qin Ying yelled with a darkened face. Behind his body, a sharp, cyan gust of wind started rotating quickly. He gnashed his teeth and said, "When I was a little kid, and just had learned to talk, Amma had incubated that little sparrow for me. I've always considered it as my brother." Cyan light stream started gushing into the longbow that Qin Ying held in his hands, and spell symbols lit up on the surface of the longbow one after another. Within a blink of an eye, over 100 spell symbols had lit up on the long bow. Ji Hao stared stunned at Qin Ying's longbow. Over 100 spell symbols. This longbow was the most powerful magic treasure Ji Hao had ever seen in his life, except the Sui Ren cane. Compared with this long bow, Qin Fu's thorns of life and death, and the Mu Xing pearl, were quite weak. "So unfair," murmured Ji Hao. "My sister married to a man from the Fire Crow clan. How could those elders let her take the most powerful inherited magic treasure away?" sniffed Qin Ying and said, "My bow is the most powerful inherited magic treasure of the Qin Yi clan. The most powerful for now." Qin Yi fit 3 long arrows on the bow string and pulled the bow back, aimed at the tall and sturdy man who had been provoking loudly from across the river. The man was over 20 feet tall, his head was densely dotted with small and sharp horns, his face was as twisted as a ghost, and his bared body was covered in ghost face. Like totems, at the moment, he was waving the huge, black wooden stake, skipping and provoking towards the cliff top. "Oi! The cowards of the Fire Crow clan! Come and fight! I am Red Horn of the Ghost clan. Come on! Who's going to fight me?" Swoosh! Followed by a slight rustling sound of the wind, which was as gentle as the sigh of a young girl, the 3 long arrows suddenly disappeared. In the next moment, the 3 arrows abruptly showed up right in front of Red Horn's face. Red Horn was tall and muscular, but his large body moved relatively sluggish. He let out a shout in shock. His 2 soup-ladle-sized eyeballs were pierced by 2 arrows, while the 3rd long arrow poked into his mouth. The arrows were rotating fast and arrowheads drilled quickly out from the back of his neck. Large amounts of black blood were gushing out of his wounds. Red Horn's eyes had even started spurting blood ceaselessly. He cursed in pain, grabbed the arrows with his hands and pulled them out hard. A large piece of black air puffed out from Red Horn's body. Slowly, his body turned translucent. After a while, his body slowly turned back to normal, by which time, all wounds had completely gone, even the punctured eyeballs were healed, as if he had never been hurt by those arrows. "Ha! This kind of attacks are all ineffective to our Ghost Clan's warriors," shouted Red Horn. He raised the wooden stake high and yelled towards the cliff top, "Are you Fire Crow Clan's warriors all cowards? Are you? Come on, give me one fighter, let me smash your head." "Ha ha!" The cheering and shouting coming from the jungle were growing louder and louder. Large groups of warriors started rushing out of the jungle, leaped high into the air, flew across the river and carefully approached the cliff. Thousands of warriors had come across the river. Amongst these warriors, were tens of over 20 feet tall Ghost Clan's warriors, all of whom had scary, ghost-like faces. Every step they walked, made the earth lightly tremble. "How?" Qin Ying turned back and looked at Ji Hao. "Hold and wait," said Ji Hao calmly, "wait, let's see what they really want." Ji Hao rubbed the little ear of the fat bear, then sat on the ground. It seemed that he didn't take those approaching enemies serious at all. Inside the dense jungle, about 20 miles away from the Fire Leopard clan's village, was a flat area that had artificially been opened up. Jiang Yao was wearing an extremely gorgeous silk cloak, stood on the edge of that area, with her head held high. Jiang Shui, who was once captured by Blackwater Jiao and Blackwater Gui, was also wearing a luxury cloak and standing beside Jiang Yao, with her teeth gnashing, showing a deep-rooted hatred on her face. "My good aunt, I want Ji Hao dead. I'll chop him, slice him into pieces, I'll feed the dirtiest bugs with his flesh," cursed Jiang Shui. Jiang Yao was smiling, and while slowly and gently stroking the delicate and tender face of Jiang Shui she said, "He will certainly die. What do you think of Ji Mu's son? I know he's not as good as Wu, but if you marry him, I, your aunt, will treat you as my own daughter." "Only if Ji Hao dies," said Jiang Shui in a low voice while gnashing her teeth. Viciousness flashed through her eyes. "Then we will make him die." Jiang Yao's beautiful face slightly twisted too. "If it wasn't for him, my Wu, my dear son wouldn't die. If it wasn't for him, you wouldn't get caught by that old bastard, Blackwater Gui, and I wouldn't have to pay that much to trade you back." From the jungle, a gigantic horned serpent slowly wriggled out. Blackwater Jiao was standing on the head of the horned serpent, while greedily staring at the sexy body of Jiang Yao up and down, and said, "Jiang Yao, there is no need to speak in this way. At least, now we have a common target, don't we? We had a deal, the heads of Ji Xia and his son are mine." After taking a deep breath, Blackwater Jiao continued proudly, "The holy land of my clan offered a reward, that only if I can bring the head of Ji Xia back and offer it to our ancestors, I can have an inherited magic treasure. If added with the head of Ji Hao, then the bloodline of the Fire Crow clan's Magus King will be thoroughly been eliminated. Imagine, how much extra rewards I can get for that." On the middle of the flat area, a black-skinned, short and scrawny old Magus priest was standing in front of a black altar, which was built with black human bones. He let out a slight towards Jiang Yao and Blackwater Jiao, then turned around and mumbled in a very low voice, "You people better be quiet. The spirit calling magic of our demon clan is unimaginably powerful, but you have to be quiet. If you accidentally disturb our ancestors, don't blame me for any unpredictable dangers." Jiang Yao and Jiang Shui instantly shut their mouths when they heard the old Magus priest. Blackwater Jiao stared at the old Magus priest. A trace of greediness and ferociousness flashed through his eyes, that seemed hard to control. The old Magus priest took a black bone stick out, and started a very weird dance around the altar. In the meanwhile, he was whispering a strange spell. Ji Hao's name appeared in that spell from time to time. A little doll, made of human skin, had been placed on the altar. A strand of hair was slightly fluttering around the waist of the doll. Jiang Yao looked at that strand of hair and showed a proud smile around the corner of her mouth. She spent quite an effort on finding this few hairs of Ji Hao from Ji Xia's home in the Gold Black Mountain, but all those efforts seemed to be worth by now. If she only could have Ji Xia's and Ji Hao's blood. The little human skin doll suddenly jumped up from the altar, followed the movements of the old Magus priest and moved its arms and legs, and started dancing like a real person. A wisp of black smoke was being released from the altar, and slowly condensed into a twisted face that had no eyes, mouth, nose and ears. Ji Hao, the scary face, suddenly let out a high-pitched scream. Bodies of all the insects and birds in the surrounding jungle exploded simultaneously. Behind the Fire Leopard clan's village, on the cliff top, Ji Hao's body suddenly shook. A blood-red light blocked his sight, and he leapt up from the ground as if he was hit by electricity. Qi Ning opened his mouth and gazed at Ji Hao stunned. Ji Hao seemed unable to control his own body. He dashed out along the trail hidden in thorns in big steps. After only the span of a few breaths, he was about to run out of the area covered in thorns. Chapter 65, Counterplot. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 65. Counterplot: How Noel.N Qingying was scared badly by Ji Hao's abrupt movement and strange behavior. Thousands of enemies were waiting under the cliff, looking at them through the miles-wide wood of thorns. On the other side of the river, were even more powerful enemies staring at them covetously. Ji Hao suddenly rush into the crowd of enemies all by himself was equal to suicide. Qingying's entire body had immediately been soaked by cold sweat. A sharp, cyan gust of wind blew out from Qingying's back, on which, a pair of looming, large wings appeared. Qingying slightly shook his body, large, cyan ripples of wind spread towards the surrounding, while bringing up tens of cyan shadows gleaming around Qingying's body. Just when Qingying had moved his foot, in order to dart out and bring Ji Hao back, the fat bear, which had been lying on the ground and had stayed motionless all the time, suddenly raised one of its paws. Poor Qingying, he hadn't paid any attention to the ground, which is why he tripped over the bare paw and fell hard on the ground. Qingying had triggered his bloodline power and had prepared to rush out with all of his strength just now, therefore, the force released from his body was tremendous, which meant he just had fallen on the ground along with a great power. Unlike Fire Crow clan's warriors, the Qinyi clan's warriors never had possessed over an extremely strong body and great physical strength. Qingying fell hard on his face, and felt as if his body was about to fall into pieces. A human-shaped, deep pit appeared on the ground, inside which, a puddle of fresh blood was forming. Qingying received a nosebleed after he fell down and smashed his face against the ground. Damn! Fat bear! I'm gonna chop your fat paw off and grill it. Qingying fell so hard that he even couldn't speak for quite a while. He twitched his body, struggled to raise his head, gnashed his teeth and growled towards the bear, Hao.is in danger. The fat bear blinked its beady eyes, while looking at Qingying as if it was looking at an idiot. Qingying stared at the bear, which had a complicated expression in its eyes, suddenly shivered and said, "Am I looking like an idiot?" The fat bear opened its mouth, yawned, then put its head near Qingying, and licked his face with its long, fat tongue. Qingying darkened his face and narrowed his eyes, while looking at Treeman, who was standing in the wood of thorns completely motionless. I almost forgot, where did all those strange beings, that Ji Hao had called out during the journey, go? Where are they? Murmured Qingying. Blood-red shadows were flashing across Ji Hao's eyes, a sharp voice was resounding in his head, this voice was ceaselessly calling his name, every time it called, Ji Hao felt a strange and unknown power directly attacking his soul as if countless daggers were trying to slice his soul into pieces. Within Ji Hao's spiritual space, a cloud of white mist started rolling over, and slowly condensed into a round flat platform. The mysterious man was sitting on the flat platform, looking down at the Yuan Dan of Ji Hao, which was shining with a purple light, and murmured with a muffled sound, "Little guy, what are you doing now?" Is there someone calling your soul with a dark, soul calling magic? Your soul power has gathered into this Yuan Dan, I don't think you can be this easily controlled by others. Ji Hao split a wisp of spiritual power, jumped into his own spiritual space and grinned to the mysterious man. The mysterious man crossed his arms over his own chest, slightly shook his head and said, "You're pretty bold, little guy, New armor." A huge piece of flame darted out from Ji Hao's back, which quickly transformed into a pair of fiery wings. Ji Hao flapped his wings, left after images and fleetingly flew across groups of enemies, who were rushing towards him and attempting to catch him. Countless enemies uttered shouts, opened their arms and tried to grab him, however, Ji Hao was like a loach that had been covered in oil, those slowly moving warriors couldn't even touch one of his hairs. A friend named Pa made it for me. Ji Hao transformed into a beam of fiery light, darted across the Fire Leopard clan's village and the river, dodged those Ghost clan's warriors such as Red Horn, and briskly flew into the dense jungle. I asked Abba to test and try it, this armor is firm, said Ji Hao. Firm, the mysterious man mumbled with a slight trace of scorn, a firm armor is less reliable than a firm body. Look at me, I've never used any kind of armor. Red Horn was waving the heavy stake and following Ji Hao closely. He was shouting behind Ji Hao. The huge wooden stake started a fierce gust of the wind, as powerful as a tornado. Countless plants were torn apart by the wind, pieces of wood swished towards Ji Hao like a heavy rain, which all burnt into ashes after hitting on the Ji Hao's fiery wings. Ji Hao completely ignored Red Horn, who was following and cursing him. He tightened his face, while his eyes lost focus, pretending that his soul and mind was controlled by someone else, and quickly moved towards the deep jungle. While Ji Hao was running fast inside the dense jungle, he asked the mysterious man curiously, "Speaking of this, you haven't ever used any armor." "That's amazing, but, do you know how to make armors, or other magic tools or treasures?" "Pa has fantastic treasure. Masking skills, I'm really jealous of him. I traded the Butian Balu magic spell, with my Mantradan with 9 secret words. I'm not going to take any advantage of you. I have some other magic spells and techniques, if you have any good tool. Making skill, we can trade one more time. Well, even if you feel that those spells of mine are too weak for you, you can give me low-level tool. Making skills, I don't care, I know nothing about it anyway. What do you think?" Ji Hao continued before the mysterious man responded. The mysterious man stayed silent for a while until Ji Hao got near to the flat area inside the jungle, where the altar was set, and was proceeding the soul. Calling magic. He slowly said, "Tool. Making skills are small tricks, not even worth mentioning that I can break any armor with a single casual punch. What do I need the tool. Making skills for?" Ji Hao paused, stopped running near the edge of the flat area, then said with a hint of astonishment, Don't you know anything about tool. Making, do you?" The mysterious man didn't respond. His arms stayed crossed in front of his own chest. The round flat platform under his body quickly disintegrated, transforming into wisps of white mist and merged white the spiritual space. Afterwards, the mysterious man silently disappeared. As usual, Ji Hao couldn't find out where it disappeared to, no matter how hard he tried. Ji Hao, upon the altar, the twisted and scary face was screaming. Ji Hao's body suddenly started to shake, and began walking towards the altar step by step, with the body wrapped by a fanet fiery light similar to a walking corpse. The scrawny old man, standing in front of the altar, let out a creepy laughter, knocked the altar with his black bone stick, then turned to Jiang Yao, and said, "Respectful Magus Priestess, I've completely controlled this kid's soul, he has become my puppet. So about what you've promised me." Bang! A towering ancient tree, that would take tens of people to hold their arms around it, was shattered by the wooden stake of Red Horn, causing a great gust of wind to blow into the flat area along with large amounts of tree fragments. Red Horn rushed inside while gasping, pointed his finger at Ji Hao and yelled, "Hey Ku! Don't you even think about taking all the rewards by yourself? What the great Magus Priestess promised us, we will not let go." Red Horn stamped his foot hard on the ground, looked at Jiang Yao, then yelled harshly, "Woman! Don't you forget, even if you've caught this kid already, after his Abba shows up, you will still need us to help you catch his Abba alive." Jiang Yao threw a dislike-filled glance at Red Horn, held her head high, slowly walked up to Ji Hao, raised his chin with her hand and said impatiently, all right, you stupid things. Everything that I've promised you, I will surely give it to you. Jiang Yao then gripped Ji Hao's face, gnashed her teeth and sneered, "Ji Hao, you damn little bastard." The seemingly focused-less pupils of Ji Hao suddenly turned back to normal, while piercing golden fiery light suddenly darted out of his eyes. Clang! Followed by a bright and clear sound, Ji Hao pulled the sharp sword that he seized from a senior magus of the Blackwater Serpent clan, and pierced it directly into Jiang Yao's chest. Ji Hao then twisted his wrist, rotated the sharp sword inside Jiang Yao's chest, and growled disgustedly, "Jiang Yao, you damn bitch, are you ever going to stop? Unless I kill you, you're going to keep troubling my family." Jiang Yao stared at Ji Hao as if she was staring at a ghost. The old Magus Priest standing in front of the altar let out a high-pitched scream in fear. Chapter 66, Strike. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 66. Strike, how did this kid move so fast? Blackwater Jiao, who had been standing on the horned serpent's head while smiling, had now tightened his body suddenly, like a frightened old cat, and stared stunned at the smoky long sword held in Ji Hao's hands. The shape of that sword was very familiar to the one Blackwater Jiao possessed. Once a Blackwater Serpent clan's warrior became a senior magus, as a reward, the clan would forge a sword for him or her in the mouth of the extremely cold of the Blackwater Holy Spring, with 10 kinds of special metals. The most powerful magus priest of the clan would inject magic power and inscribe spell symbols into the sword by himself. The sword forged in this way would become a powerful weapon, which gathers the essence of the 10 of spatial metals, and is sharp enough to slice through gold and iron, and could kill a man without being stained by a single drop of blood. The sword held by Ji Hao was gained from the battle less than a month ago when the Black Serpent clan warriors launched a surprise attack on the Cold Stream Valley. Ji Xia badly wounded a cousin of Blackwater Jiao and had seized the sword from his cousin's hands. In Ji Hao's hand this sword seemed to have become a live being, quite fast and agile. The moment the glistening of the sword edge flashed through the air, even Blackwater Jiao saw only a beam of bright light. The sharp sword had already penetrated Jiang Yao's chest. If he does that to me, I'm afraid that even I wouldn't be able to dodge that completely. Blackwater Jiao roughly measured his reacting speed against this horrible attack launched by Ji Hao, and cold sweat suddenly started pouring down from his forehead. Ji Hao was only a newly promoted junior magus who just had activated his bloodline power, but his sword using skill was quite mature. If he would be allowed to grow up in this way, then he would most likely replace Ji Xia and become another horrifying nightmare for the Blackwater Serpent clan. For thousands of years, Ji Xia and his family were like an eternal nightmare for the Blackwater Serpent clan, one from which they could never get rid of. The Blackwater Serpent clan had spent incalculable efforts and sacrifices to kill all of Ji Xia's brothers and elders. By now, only Ji Xia and his son had been left alive. However, Ji Hao had such terrifying potential. Blackwater Jiao growled to the sky in rage. How come a talented kid like this was not one of the Blackwater Serpent clan's kids? Thought Blackwater Jiao. Blackwater Jiao stamped his foot hard, after which the horned serpent let a sharp hissing sound out. The nearly 100 feet long serpent raised its upper body and swooshed out, opened its jaws and spew a mouthful of blue-black cold air towards Ji Hao. Blackwater Jiao leapt up from the head of the serpent and pulled his sword out. A large piece of black mist rose from his body, and large amounts of black ice fragments slowly started falling down around his body, tinkling against the ground. The jungle within the circumference a few miles around was quickly frozen. Blackwater Jiao raised the long sword with exactly the same shape and color as the one held in Ji Hao's hands and pierced towards Ji Hao's left shoulder. 10 feet long, black light spurted from the sword tip. If this attack would succeed, then the sword would pierce through Ji Hao's shoulder directly into his heart and get him killed. Ha! Die! The Ghost Clan's senior magus, Red Horn, who was chasing Ji Hao all this time, raised his huge wooden stake high and smashed towards Ji Hao's face along with a strong gust of wind. The Ghost Clan's warriors were born to be cruel. All he was concerned with at the moment was simply to get Ji Hao killed. He didn't even notice that he accidentally involved Jiang Yao in his attacking range. The long sword in Ji Hao's hands was shaking intensely, making a bright and clear clang-like sound. The mantra Dan with 9 secret words could connect with the whole universe and borrow power from everything in this world. Ji Hao triggered the Blackwater Serpent clan's special magic injected in the long sword and sent a part of his own power into the sword at the same time. A cold stream of the sword's power from the sword and a hot stream of Ji Hao's power, which were opposites of each other, somehow supported each other, were quickly pulsating on the sword edge, transformed into a black and red light and rotated around the sword fast like a windmill. Once the two beams of light started rotating, blood spurted from the Jiang Yao's chest and pieces of flesh flew away from her body. Half of the blood that spurted out was frozen into ice crystals, while the other half of the blood boiled and turned into vapor. Jiang Yao stared at Ji Hao with a badly twisted face, continuously coughing blood up, and said in a shocked tone, "How did you? The demon clan's soul. Calling magic was cast by their most powerful magus priest, even Ji Xia. Wouldn't be able to defend against that. I'm not my Abba." Ji Xiao gave an irrelevant answer, pulled the sword out and swung it towards Jiang Yao's neck along with an eye-piercing cold light. In the meanwhile, he said loudly, "Jiang Yao, you should have died a long time ago. Don't you feel tired of chasing us like this?" Jiang Yao curved her lips and let out a weird smile, gnashed her teeth and said, "Ji Hao, I will remember you. You almost killed me, I will remember you." A red jade piece inside her belt suddenly burst up, a bright sphere of flame wrapped Jiang Yao up. A single-legged bifong bird slowly flew out of the flame, wrapped Jiang Yao's body with its faint fiery feathers, then transformed into a beam of fiery light, attempting to rise into the air. RG, Thorn of Life and Death, kill. Ji Hao growled in a low voice, opened his mouth and spewed a mouthful of blood, and pointed his finger at Jiang Yao, who was wrapped in the flame. 3 long, back needles darted out from Ji Hao's mouth and punctured the flame that was protecting Jiang Yao, like 3 black lightning bolts. 3 brightly flashing magus acupoints in Jiang Yao's chest and stomach suddenly exploded, black, fresh blood gushed out like 3 fountains. Thorn of Life and Death. Qing Fu's inherited magus treasure. Why do you have them? Jiang Yao screamed madly. Along with her voice, the bifong bird let out a sharp call, and transformed back into a beam of bright light and flashed into the cloud within only a moment, and quickly disappeared, without leaving any trace. Jiang Yao was saved and taken away by her life-saving magic treasure, without leaving any trace to be followed. All these happened so fast. The edge of Blackwater Jiao's sword was still 7 to 8 feet away from Ji Hao's body, and Red Horn's wooden stake was still hundreds of feet away. Ji Hao had already seriously wounded Jiang Yao, and her life-saving treasure, given by Jiang Bo, had activated automatically, saving and taking her and took her away. "You litter bastard!" Blackwater Jiao cursed loudly in anger. The black mist, emitted from his body, was growing dense, and the long sword held in his hand started shaking intensely as well. A horrifying cold air shrouded the entire area. Within tens of miles in radius, all of the plants were covered in thick black ice. After that, Blackwater Jiao shook his wrist, making all of the black ice burst out. Suddenly, a fierce cold air rose and shrouded the jungle for tens of miles around, causing countless gigantic trees to shatter into ice pieces. All the nearby trees were shattered into ashes, only 2 especially tall and huge trees stayed still. It seemed as if they were not influenced by the cold air at all. Furthermore, the 2 trees suddenly opened their tree hole-like mouths, letting out low roars that were filled with anger. On their tree trunks, for spheres of green lights suddenly lit up, like 2 pairs of eyes, staring at Blackwater Jiao. 10,000 years old tree men. Blackwater Jiao's body was instantly soaked in cold sweat. He quickly recognized these 2 trees. The tree men that were at least 10,000 years old. These tree men had very bad tempers. If anyone damaged the jungle in front of them, then the person would become their archenemy. Blackwater Jiao just released all of his power, causing the jungle within the circumference of tens of miles around to be completely damaged. This would make these 2 tree men, who had appeared suddenly, to do whatever they could and hunt him to the end of the world. Ji Hao leapt high into the air, facing the bright light emitted from Blackwater Jiao's sword, raised his own sword high into the air and pierced towards the heart of Blackwater Jiao along with that eye-piercing, red-black light. Followed by a thunderous noise, a faint layer of light was rotating around Ji Hao's body. The attack that had been launched by Blackwater Jiao with all of his power was easily blocked by this layer of light. Ji Hao's body slightly shook. He felt that all of his internal organs were slightly vibrating, and a hot stream gushed up through his throat. Followed by that, Ji Hao spat a mouthful of hot blood out. Blackwater Jiao was an elite senior magus, while Ji Hao was only a newly promoted junior magus. There was a huge difference between the 2 of them. Blackwater Jiao could crush hundreds of junior magi with a single punch. However, the armor made by Pa had amazing defensive capabilities. The attack launched by Blackwater Jiao with all of his strength only made Ji Hao spew a small specks of blood out. The edge of Ji Hao's sword was extremely cold. Ji Hao released all of his power and controlled the sword. Under Blackwater Jiao's horrified eyes, the sword stabbed with some difficulty into his body through his firm leather armor. Ji Hao didn't stop, and continued to push his sword harder and harder. The sword tip pierced 3 inches into the chest of Blackwater Jiao. Chapter 67, Trap. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 67. Trap. A senior Magus body is all toughened up by practicing and fighting for thousands of times. It's as heavy as a mountain, as firm as the earth, and hundreds, and even thousands of times harder than iron. Except other senior magi at the same level, no other person is able to hurt even a hair on a senior magi, unless he or she wielded one of those legendary weapons in their hands. The sharp sword in Ji Hao's hands was only a reward given to every new senior magi of the Blackwater Serpent clan. Though it was capable of slicing gold and jade, it was nowhere near the level of legendary weapons. If used by another senior Magus, this sword could certainly harm the body of a senior Magus. However, in Ji Hao's hands, it wasn't supposed to hurt even a little bit of Blackwater Jiao's body. Blackwater Jiao looked down, while he stared at the sharp sword which was inserted 3 inches deep into his own body. He couldn't believe it. A stream of cold air and a stream of hot air were rotating around each other, drilling deeper into Blackwater Jiao's body. Blackwater Jiao even heard the muffled noises made by the cold and hot gaseous powers clashing suddenly against his own muscle. Damn! You little bastard! How could you hurt me? Blackwater Jiao looked at Ji Hao with a twisted face and yelled, "You little bastard! You are just like a little rabbit that didn't even grow its teeth yet, but bit a great winged tiger, a little Jurassic beast, one that didn't even wing yet, kicked the scales of a flood dragon broke. This is impossible. Wu Guan Pai Li, Tai Jia Fei Xiong, Ji Ji Ru Lu Ling." Ji Hao grinned to Blackwater Jiao, locked his finger together and pressed his hands on the hilt of the sword, and cast the spell loudly. The cold and hot stream, wrapped around the sword, started coiling and rubbing against each other. Numerous lightning bolts appeared within the cold and hot air. Up in the air, a small dark cloud quietly appeared. Ji Hao's Yuan Dan. A huge sphere that shone with a bright purple light within his spiritual space. Suddenly disappeared. Within an area of tens of miles, a gale had started, and large amounts of natural power continuously gathering towards Ji Hao's palms. Followed by a thunderous bang, 18 human head thick lightning bolts wildly fell down in a row from the small dark cloud, and hit on the sword hilt held in Ji Hao's hands. Compared with months ago, when Ji Hao had spied on Ji Shu and Ji Wu with the spying crow and attacked them with lightning, Ji Hao's power had improved by more than 100 times. Just now, he had sent all of his internal power into the small dark clouds, and had cast the 9. Lightning clouds magic. The natural lightning power that had been drawn by Ji Hao today was over hundreds of times greater than months ago. The lightning gathered on the edge of the sword, gushed into Blackwater Jiao's body through the metal sword under Ji Hao's control. Ji Hao sprayed a mouthful of blood out on the sword, stared at Blackwater Jiao, whose face was badly twisted and body covered in lightning bolts, then cast a Magus magic, taught by Ji Kuei, the master Magus of the Fire Crow clan. Bang! A single, monotonous syllable came out of Ji Hao's mouth. The sword held in Ji Hao's hands started shaking intensely. The thickly dotted spell symbols on the surface of the sword lit up simultaneously. A torrent of destructive power contained in the sword suddenly gushed out. "No!" screamed Blackwater Jiao, his face became even more twisted, raised his head and widened his eyes, stared at Ji Hao with eyes filled with astonishment. The magic cast by Ji Hao just now could disintegrate a Magus tool within a moment, and release all of the tremendous power contained in the Magus tool as a deadly attack. This was an extremely powerful and difficult magic. In the Blackwater Serpent clan, none of those new Magus could learn such a difficult magic. Only those Magus priests who practiced for over 20 years could master this kind of powerful magic spells. Though Blackwater Jiao was a powerful senior Magus, however, he was not talented in Magus Priest's magic at all. In other words, he was just a warrior like Ji Xia, who had a relative simple mind and who depended purely on their physical strength. Magus Priest magic spells, like disintegrating a Magus tool, even for the current Blackwater Jiao, was impossible to learn. Blackwater Jiao could destroy this sword with his physical strength, however, he could not activate the spell symbols on the sword, making those integrated spell symbol disintegrate and release all of the power contained in the sword within a moment to attack his enemy. A pair of fiery wings stretched behind Ji Hao's back. Ji Hao then transformed into a beam of light and flew aside, leaving a mirage of red afterimages. Red Horn from the Ghost Clan let out a roar, and rushed towards Ji Hao. All of the Ghost Clan's warriors had merged with evil ghosts, that had been worshipped by their clan since they were newborn kids. Ghosts that were worshipped by them were extremely evil beings. What they hated and feared most was the positive, natural lightning power. Ji Hao just drew the natural lightning power and attacked Blackwater Jiao. This made Red Horn immediately see him as a sworn enemy. Red Horn's pupils instantly became blood-red. He raised the wooden stick and swung it towards Ji Hao with all of his power. However, Ji Hao moved fleetingly fast, flew away and dodged the wooden stake when the stake was about to scratch his face. The huge, wooden stake heavily thudded against Blackwater Jiao's body, who was wrapped in lightning bolts and twitching. Following the raging curses from Blackwater Jiao, the firm leather armor worn by him was shattered into pieces by Red Horn's wooden stake, and the gigantic horned serpent under Blackwater Jiao's feet was sent flying by the residual force of Red Horn's attack. In the next moment, followed by a thunderous bang, both of the cold and hot air suddenly burst out. With an eye-piercing light, the sword, stabbed in Blackwater Jiao's chest, exploded suddenly. Countless rice-sized metal fragments darted towards every directions. The power contained within every single metal fragment was nearly as powerful as a full-strength punch of a new senior Magus. Hundreds of metal fragments hit Red Horn's body. A large cloud of blood mist suddenly rose. Those metal fragments punctured his body, and wounded the sturdy body, causing it to be riddles with holes within a moment. Red Horn staggered tens of steps backwards, then fell hard on the ground. After uttering a great roar towards the sky, he was badly injured, sat on the ground and couldn't even move. Blackwater Jiao and his horned serpent were hit even harder. The sword exploded right in front of their faces. Half of Blackwater Jiao's chest was shattered, the squirming internal organs were exposed to the air, blood continuously spurted out of the wound. Countless metal fragments, which were shining with electrical light, were inlaid in his chest and stomach. Strong electric currents went through his body. Though Ji Hao was not powerful enough to really hurt Blackwater Jiao with the lightning light he had drawn from the sky, the whole body of Blackwater Jiao was paralyzed, and couldn't move for a while. 7 to 8 miles away, 2,000s of feet tall gigantic trees let out a thunderous roar, and swung tens of tremendous branches towards the ground. Blackwater Jiao screamed out terrified. A cold sphere of black mist wrapped his body up, suddenly brought his body up, and rose hundreds of feet high into the air. His horned serpent near him didn't react as fast as him. The serpent body was huge, therefore, it moved relatively slow. Added with the fact that it was stunned by the wooden stake of Red Horn just now, the serpent didn't even move while facing those gigantic branches swinging towards it. Along with a bone-cracking sound, tens of thick, dark green roots thrust out from the ground, puncturing the serpent's body. This senior Magus-level horned serpent struggled wildly in pain. Right after it had let out a few howls, the tens of roots shook intensely and ripped the hundreds of feet long horned serpent into tens of pieces, followed by a great wail. Do not waste its blood. Senior Magus blood. Collect them for me. 10 vats of booze to each. Ji Hao flew high into the air. The 3 black thorns of life and death darted downwards following Ji Hao's hand gesture, and hit Blackwater Jiao, who was wrapped in the cloud of dark mist. Blackwater Jiao started spewing blood. The 3 black thorns of life and death had just penetrated his 3 Magus acupoints. He sensed that his power suddenly became weaker. Somebody! Come! Come and kill this little bastard! Blackwater Jiao was nearly driven crazy by the weird behavior of Ji Hao. Does this little bastard know the 2000s-years-old tree men? Which means that this is a trap, shouted Blackwater Jiao in his head. Large groups of Blackwater Serpent Clan's warriors rushed out of the dense jungle under the lead of 4 senior magi, and darted towards Ji Hao while growling in low voices. Ghost Clan's Red Horn roared out loudly. Hundreds of, over 20 feet tall, Ghost Clan's warriors rushed over with big steps. Amongst these Ghost Clan's warriors, the tallest one even reached 50 feet in height. The Ghost Clan's master Magus Priest, who was standing in front of the black, human-bone altar, stayed stunned for a while, then suddenly started screaming and jumping, followed by his voice. Gray, cold whirlwinds, that could pierce into the bones, were started to flow in the surrounding area. Tens of utterly pale infants slowly fluttered over. The ground shook intensely, a tens of feet thick, jade-like arm fleetingly thrust out from the ground, smashed and broke all of Ghost Clan's master Magus Priest's bones. 1. Jurassic beast. Probably a dinosaur-like beast. Chapter 68, Snow Melted. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 68. Snow melted ******, yo, tens of naked, deadly pale infants had been floating in the air, eyes shining with black light and staring expressionlessly at the Demon Clan's master Magus Priest, who had been smashed on the ground by the gigantic stone hand. These infants were evil creatures that had been raised by special dark magics of the Demon Clan, neither alive or dead, neither entity nor phantom. They were very mysterious and powerful, not afraid of any kind of weapons, and had the special ability of controlling souls of others, which was extremely hard to deal with. However, their only weakness was the man. The master Magus Priest. Who was controlling them? These evil creatures were way too powerful and savage. Even the Demon Clan's Magus Priests wouldn't risk to let them get out of the control, and always controlled them with very rigorous magic spells. Therefore, when the master Magus Priest had been knocked out by the stone hand, these evil infants had all lost connection with the outside world, blankly stopped moving and floated in the air. Kill him! Kill him! An ear-piercing scream came from the sideway. Ji Hao turned around, saw Jiang Shui standing on a rock less than a mile away, pointing her finger at Ji Hao, and yelled loudly, "Anyone who kills him and chop his head off, his or her clan will be under Bai Fong Clan's eternal protection." Sniffing sounds came from the crowd. There were countless warriors from numerous clans running over. However, senior magi and Magus Priests from those clans all sniffed scornfully when they heard Jiang Shui. All the clans gathered here were all free clans that had always been minding only their own business, neither under any other clan's protection or control. The Bai Fong Clan's eternal protection sounded pretty good, but in fact, once they accepted the protection of the Bai Fong Clan, they had to send a large amount of offering to the Bai Fong Clan each year. Additionally, their warriors wouldn't be as free as nowadays. Instead, they had to be prepared for Bai Fong Clan's transfer command anytime. Therefore, what Jiang Shui had just promised was not that attractive to these clans. Jiang Shui seemed to have realized the mistake she made, instantly changed her words and said, "Whoever kills Ji Hao, his or her clan will get reward from the Bai Fong Clan. Weapons and armors. Enough to arm 300 warriors, all forged by the best steel." According to the rules of the southern wasteland, Jiang Shui beat her own chest hard while yelling loudly, "I swear in the name of our Bai Fong Clan's ancestors' souls, my father is a Bai Fong Clan's elder, named Jiang Shu. Whoever get Ji Hao killed, his or her clan will get 300 sets of armors and weapons that are of the highest quality as a reward." Red Horn struggled back up from the ground, waved his huge wooden stake and growled, 500. Jiang Shui gnashed her teeth, then nodded and said, 500, then 500. Before Jiang Shui finished speaking, Red Horn shouted out and rushed towards Ji Hao along with the hundreds of Ghost Clan's warriors, while waving the large wooden stake. The ground in front of them suddenly split up. An over 200 feet tall, white stoneman, whose whole body shining in a jade-like luster, darted out from the ground at a lightning speed. Hundreds of yellow spell symbols were flashing fast on its snow-white body. This stone giant was so tall, that Red Horn's head couldn't even reach his knees. Judging from its gigantic, heavy body, he should be moving very sluggishly. However, the body shape of this stone giant seemed tall and slim. Additionally, he moved even faster and nimbler than an ape. He grabbed towards the air. A stone pillar rose from the ground. Grilled meat. The stone giant pulled the over 30-foot long, tank-thick stone pillar out of the ground, letting out a great roar and swung it towards Red Horn. Along with a silver light and loud whistle of the wind, the stone pillar thudded hard on Red Horn's body. Red Horn only had enough time to raise his wooden stake and hold it in front of his chest. The stone giant's power was immeasurably great. The tremendous power easily shattered Red Horn's wooden stake and hit on Red Horn's body along with a cyan, fierce gale, caused by the stone pillar. Red Horn howled out in pain. His body suddenly transformed into a cloud of mist, and then transformed back in human shape. He started transforming his body quickly, alternating between his mist and human body, attempting to dodge stone giant's attack. However, the stone giant was also a powerful creature that had been nourished by the vast natural power. A trace of mysterious and special natural power was contained in his attack, which was enough to hurt Red Horn even when he had transformed his body into a cloud of mist. More than a half of the black cloud was shattered, and large amounts of blood sprayed out from the mist. The mist started rolling inwards. Soon, followed by a loud cry, Red Horn fell down from the mist. Half of his body was smashed. He fell and tumbled for a short distance on the ground, then lied still as if he had died. Behind Red Horn, tens of most powerful Ghost Clan's warriors were sent flying by the power of Stone Giant's attack. All of them were coughing up blood and stumbled back. They looked at the Stone Giant, and couldn't hide the fear in their fiendish eyes. "O Spirit of the Earth, we have never offended you." A Ghost Clan senior Magus, looking similar to Red Horn, yelled to the Stone Giant. "Grilled meat," roared the Stone Giant with a very muffled yet thunderous voice, then swung the stone pillar towards the ground once again. Those Ghost Clan's warriors didn't even dare to resist against the Stone Giant's attack. The fact that the Ghost Clan got to survive and prosper in the southern wasteland, meant that they must have had their own way of survival. They were all clearly aware of the fact that creatures like this stoneman were formed and nourished by the nature's power. They also knew that the stoneman kind's power was unimaginably great, and probably only the dragon kind were stronger than them. In the southern wasteland, creatures that could compete with the stonemans in physical strength wouldn't be more than 5 altogether. To fight against a crazy stoneman who kept murmuring, "grilled meat." What kind of stupid people would dare to do that? This, over 200 feet tall stone giant, badly frightened all those warriors from the allied clans. All of them stopped running, looked around, hoping that some brave man would rush up, draw the stone giant's attention away, which would give them the chance to kill Ji Hao. However, if one was hoping like this, then hundreds, even thousands of people were all hoping the same thing, including the 4 senior magi from the Black Water Serpent clan. All of those people stood stunned, looking at each other. At last, everyone stayed 3 miles away from Ji Hao. Not a single warrior dared to move an inch closer. Jiang Shui was standing on the rock nearly a mile away. Her face was about to turn green in anger. "You useless cowards! Are you even men? Aren't you the brave warriors of your clans? It's just a stone monster. Why are you so afraid of that?" screamed Jiang Shui. While Jiang Shui was shouting, the ground split up again. A black arm and a yellow arm thrust out from the ground. Soon, an over 1,600 feet tall stoneman and a 1,200 to 1,300 feet tall stoneman came out of the ground. Compared with the snow-white stone giant, who had shown up earlier, the whole body of the black stoneman was emitting a cold air that made people shiver, while the body of the yellow stoneman was extremely heavy. While the yellow stoneman was standing on the ground, within the area of hundreds of feet in radius around him, the gravity would raise to 20 times greater. Ji Hao was the nearest one to the yellow stone giant. He felt that his body had become so heavy that it was difficult to move even for a bit. Jiang Shui was stunned for a short while, then screamed out again, 1,000 sets of armors and weapons. Kill Ji Hao. Then you will get 1,000 sets of armors and weapons that has been forged from the best quality steel in the southern wasteland. All of the warriors gasped deeply. 1,000 sets of armors and weapons, forged by steel, were way too attractive for these southern wasteland clans with low productivity. Jiang Shui waved her arms. It seemed as if she was going to say something else. However, the next instant a noise of an arrow piercing through a human body could be heard. An arrow made of ghost-face spider's legs had silently flown across the air, and had penetrated Jiang Shui's white and tender neck from her back. Blood splashed out. The poison dipped on the arrow quickly spread inside her body. Jiang Shui's beautiful face suddenly turned dark green, after which her body fell silently on the ground. Translator note. The Chinese word shui, Jiang Shui's last name, means snow, therefore, the title of this chapter was Snow Melt. Chapter 69, Massacre. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 69. Massacre. Thud. Blackwater Jiao, who had been badly wounded, finally fell onto the ground. A few Blackwater Serpent Clan's warriors rushed over and held him up. An old Magus priest took out a black stone jar, withdrew an ointment that was emitting a light and nice herbal scent out from the jar, and spread a thick layer of it on Blackwater Jiao's wounds. Blackwater Jiao paid no attention on his own serious injuries. Instead, he was pointing his finger at Ji Hao and wildly laughed out loud while yelling. Ji Hao, you little bastard. You're so dead. Ha ha ha. This little woman, your people are the ones who killed her. Her father is Jiang Shu, an elder magus of the Baifeng clan. You're no more than an ordinary clansman of a Baifeng clan's dependency clan, and still you killed this little woman. You're in so much trouble. While gasping deeply, Blackwater Jiao continued with a ferocious face, not only you, your Abba, your Amma, and anyone that has any connection with you, will have to die. Hee, I heard that your Amma was the most beautiful woman in Qingyi clan long time ago. Killing her like this would be such a waste. How much do you think your Amma would be worth? How much should I spend to buy your Amma as my slave? Ji Hao raised his left arm, then put his right hand on his left arm while looking at Blackwater Jiao's twisted face. Ji Hao's right palm suddenly spurted out a large piece of flame. Blackwater Jiao, Jiang Shui was killed by you. How does that has anything to do with me? Said Ji Hao coldly and expressionlessly. He had already made up his mind that he was going to kill Blackwater Jiao today. I'm a Fire Crow clan's clansman. I don't have any reason to kill the daughter of a Baifeng clan's elder. It has to be you who killed Jiang Shui. Little bastard. We have so many people here. We can testify that it was you who killed Jiang Shui. Red Horn, who was lying on the ground, with half of his body smashed and continuously twitching, screamed aloud after he heard Ji Hao. You. Testify, said Ji Hao loudly, but you all died. Who else can testify? While laughing, an eye-piercing, golden-red fiery light darted out from Ji Hao's right palm. The light was so bright that people nearby couldn't even look directly at it. A great heat instantly shrouded the jungle for miles round. The rocks hundreds of feet away behind Ji Hao were suddenly burnt red by the heat, and tens of rocks near Ji Hao's body quickly melted into lava. What is this? Blackwater Jiao and the other people exclaimed loudly all together. This is take this. A high-pitched voice came from the sky, followed by that voice, a gigantic black eagle, with the wingspan of hundreds of feet long, silently glided through the air above the crowd. From the back of the eagle, a black, huge ape leapt down, holding a heavy, large wooden stick in his hands. The ape's body was wrapped around by a fierce gust of black wind, like a great dragon that was circling around ape's body. In the air, ape raised the wooden stick high and swung it towards Blackwater Jiao, along with a loud roaring sound of the wind that seemed powerful enough to crack the earth and split the sky. Every single black hair of the gigantic black ape was standing up. his pupils were shining with a blood-red light. The huge wooden stick was falling from the sky like a lightning bolt. Just as Blackwater Jiao raised his head and glanced up at the sky, trying to find out what was happening, the thick stick had already hit hard on his forehead. Followed by a thunderous bang, the old Magus priest standing beside Blackwater Jiao raised a serpent skull in the flurry. Wisps of black smoke spurted out from the palm-sized serpent skull, which held Ape's thick stick back. With a loud crash, the bodies of Blackwater Jiao and the old Magus priest were shocked violently. Blood spurted out from their eyes, ears, mouths, and noses simultaneously. The fierce black wind blew towards the surrounding, and sent the 4 Blackwater Serpent Clan senior magi and other thousands of elite warriors away towards all directions, like a bunch of fallen leaves. The 4 senior magi barely stood still under the strong wind, they even waved their swords towards Ape a few times, but the other thousands of Blackwater Serpent Clan's warriors were all howling in the air. Novice magi warriors were torn into pieces by the horrible wind at first. Afterwards, junior magi warriors were torn apart by the wind while screaming, one after another. Blood and body pieces were splashing everywhere, even covering the sky. One single full-powered attack launched by Ape shattered thousands of elite Blackwater Serpent Clan's warriors, who were present there, into pieces, with the exception of Blackwater Jiao, the other 4 senior magi, and the old Magus priest. All of the southern wasteland warriors were required to remember one life-saving principle. When senior magi were fighting, the rest of the non-senior magi warriors had to run as far away as possible. If they would stay at least 20 miles away from the fighting spot, then it would be possible to keep themselves alive. However, these Blackwater Serpent Clan's warriors obviously didn't follow that principle this time, and thousands of them were killed by a single attack of Ape. The Black Eagle glided across the lower part of the sky again. 7 to 8 sturdy beasts that walked on their 2 legs similar to humans, leapt down from the eagle's back, howled and rushed into the surrounding groups of the allied forces. Amongst these beasts were 2 Highland King Kong gorillas, 1 male and 1 female, 3 blood-face baboons, which were close relatives of apes. The other 4 were cold-wind soft monkeys. They had relatively small bodies, but moved as fast as ghosts, and would let ceaseless high-pitched howls out, while running. The 2 Highland King Kong gorillas didn't have any weapons, they were tens of feet tall, and were waving their tank-sized fists. Every punch thrown out by them caused the ground within tens of feet in radius to shake. Hundreds of allied clans' warriors were shattered into clouds of blood-mist while screaming and crying under the power of their punches. The 3 blood-face baboons had been standing on the ground in a triangle. Their blood-red, ghost-like faces were squirming. They opened their mouths widely, continuously swallowing and spitting towards the air. Every time they did this, there were 1,000 of warriors who would lose control of their bodies and spew blood from every opening of their bodies. All those blood were drawn into the stomachs of these blood-face baboons through their mouths, and absorbed by their bodies. The 4 cold-wind soft monkeys were even more horrible. They had been running fast and leaving nearly 1,000 feet long trail of afterimages behind their bodies. None of the ordinary warriors could clearly see even their shadows. Every time they thrust their sharp claws out, they would dug out a warrior's heart, then threw it away. Hot, beating hearts were thrown everywhere. Blood splashed everywhere, bones and flesh were thrown flying in the air. These 9 beasts called by Ape were incomparably fierce and cruel. Each one of them was a senior Magus-level powerful creatures. Within the blink of an eye, over 10,000 of warriors were slaughtered by them. The allied troops were unprepared for all this, causing everyone to be badly frightened. "Get out of the way. You trash!" An especially strong and sturdy man growled out, raised a heavy axe, and went hacking towards a Highland King Kong gorilla. Only a senior Magus could deal with another senior Magus. When senior Magi were fighting, the rest of the warriors better stayed as far away as they could. There were over 100 senior Magi amongst the allied troops. Once they started fighting with all of their power, the rest of the warriors standing within 10 miles near them would all be smashed and die. Therefore, all of senior magi from different clans started yelling at their clansmen, telling them to leave as fast as they could. However, to leave was not as simple as they thought. Ape's 9 friends rushed into the crowd and started massacring. Soon, streams of blood were flowing on the ground like rivers. Senior magi could barely hold attacks of these beasts back, however, they couldn't risk to launch any attack with all of their powers and kill their own clansmen accidentally. The allied troop had fallen into chaos. They didn't even had made retreatment plans. How could they draw back within a short time span if they didn't even know which direction to go? Watching the warriors from different clans being massacred by the few beasts, Blackwater Jiao, who was trying his best to resist the thick stick of Ape, let out a scream. Ji Hao! How dare you! Even Ji Xia wouldn't dare to kill warriors from this many clans at once. Do you want the Fire Crow clan to become the common enemy for countless southern wasteland clans? Ji Hao looked at Blackwater Jiao, as if he was looking at a fool, and said, "You challenged us first, and attempted to kill us. Common enemy. All these clans are already our enemies. And as far as enemies go, we can just kill them all." Ji Hao had prepared for quite a while. Finally, he waved his right hand in the air. A large piece of golden fiery light burst out from Ji Hao's right palm. In the next moment, a nearly 20 feet long spear that was spurting a raging fire appeared in Ji Hao's hand. Within the flame of the spear, a palm-sized, 3-legged gold crow was hovering lively and cawing with a silvery, sweet voice.